Every time I see her demanding to be called Duchess of Sussex, I laugh. Nobody in Britain calls her that. Meghan Markle. She got lucky, met her prince, dragged him out of the bosom of his family, dragged him away from the monarchy, which bestowed those titles on them, and has now ruthlessly, with him, exploited those titles for massive personal gain. And I think it's disgusting and hypocritical. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. I hope that King Charles, who obviously is massively distracted by his illness, but I hope that King Charles at some stage just has that conversation and says, you can't keep the titles, I'm sorry, but you can't keep demeaning the status of being a member of the royal family and attacking the family and the monarchy and retain your titles. You can just be Harry and Meghan. And see how you get on, by the way, when you're no longer royals, because the answer is not very far.
It's been a year since that infamous interview, the one where Piers Morgan and Megyn Kelly sat down and tore into Meghan Markle with all their usual venom. Back then, Morgan mocked Meghan for demanding to be called the Duchess of Sussex and claimed she'd be nothing without her royal title. Fast forward to today, and it's almost poetic because everything he said has aged terribly. Meghan Markle, without needing a crown, a title or palace approval, has built a global presence that's bigger, bolder, and far more influential than the one she ever had as a working royal. So today, we're revisiting that old interview, not to relive the hate, but to show how completely wrong Piers was, and how powerfully Meghan has proven herself in the real world. Let's start with the claim that Meghan demands to be called Duchess of Sussex. In reality, there's absolutely no evidence of that. Meghan rarely uses her title at all, especially in her professional and advocacy work. Whether it's her Archewell Foundation, her podcast Archetypes, or her public appearances at events like the Invictus Games or One Young World, Meghan simply goes by Meghan Markle. The irony? It's the media, not Meghan, who constantly reminds the world she's the Duchess. Piers Morgan, of course, loves to weaponize that narrative, because, let's face it, without talking about Meghan, his ratings would fall faster than his credibility. Morgan accused Meghan of dragging Harry out of the family as if Harry were a puppet with no voice of his own. But anyone who's paid attention knows the truth. Harry himself has been clear in interviews, his memoir Spare, and his Netflix docu-series that he made the decision to protect his family from a toxic system. He saw what the relentless British press did to his mother, Princess Diana. He watched history begin to repeat itself. Leaving wasn't betrayal, it was survival. And Meghan stood by him through that storm, something no one in the palace was willing to do. Perhaps the most ridiculous claim of all Piers said, quote, "See how you get on when you're no longer royals." The answer is not very far. Well, let's see how that prediction aged. Since leaving the royal family in 2020, Meghan and Harry launched Archewell Productions, producing global documentaries and inspirational content. Meghan's podcast, Archetypes, topped Spotify charts in over 40 countries and even won the People's Choice Award. The couple's Netflix docu-series became one of the most watched in Netflix history-breaking viewing records within 24 hours. Meghan signed major partnerships, not for gossip or fame, but for impact, including her deal with Lemonada Media for a new podcast venture focused on purpose and empowerment. She's been named one of Time's 100 most influential people, featured in Forbes and recognized by Variety for her philanthropic work. And she did all that while raising 2 children, maintaining a healthy marriage, and creating a legacy of empowerment that reaches far beyond the royal bubble. So, Piers, if that's not very far, then maybe success looks different outside your narrow lens. There's a deeper issue here, the double standard that follows Meghan everywhere she goes. When she speaks up, She's demanding. When she's silent, she's cold. When she works, she's self-promoting. When she rests, she's lazy. But when other royals do the same, they're called dignified and dutiful. This isn't about a title. It's about control and about who's allowed to define their own story. Piers Morgan and others in that old-school media circle can't stand that Meghan walked away from their control, built her own platform, and is now thriving on her own terms. Let's take a moment to look at Meghan's real work, the part the tabloids never show. She's worked with organisations like World Central Kitchen to help families affected by disasters. She co-founded the Archewell Foundation, focusing on mental health, women's rights, and community healing. She launched the Smart Works initiative, helping women re-enter the workforce with confidence and support. She's given inspiring speeches for One Young World, the United Nations, and Spotify's Women in Leadership Summit. Her commitment to mental health and female empowerment has turned her into a global voice for compassion and change. None of this required a palace or a tiara, just purpose, passion, and persistence. So why does Piers Morgan still rage about Meghan a year later? Because deep down, he knows she represents everything the old media world fears: independence, diversity, and accountability. She's a woman who refused to play by their rules and succeeded anyway. Piers built his brand on outrage, but Meghan built hers on action. He sells drama. She creates change. And that's the difference between relevance and resentment. Meghan Markle today doesn't need to be called Duchess to be respected. She's a humanitarian, a producer, a mother, a businesswoman, and a leader. And maybe that's what bothers critics the most. She's defined herself, not by what she married into, but by what she stands for. She's proof that your worth isn't tied to titles, approval, or royal bloodlines. It's built by the life you choose, the work you do, and the kindness you show. Here's what's interesting. When Meghan was first married into the royal family, the same media outlets celebrated her as a breath of fresh air. Headlines called her the future of the monarchy. Magazines praised her as a trailblazer. Critics lauded her intelligence, her activism, her voice. But the moment she chose to leave, the moment she decided the institution wasn't working for her family, the narrative flipped. Suddenly she became the problem. Suddenly her ambitions were threatening. Her voice was too loud. The only thing that changed? She started writing her own story instead of letting others write it for her. That terrifies people like Piers, because if Meghan could walk away and thrive, what does that say about the institution they've spent decades defending? What does it say about the system they profit from? What critics refuse to acknowledge is the scale of what Meghan has built. Her Archewell Foundation doesn't just sit around. It works behind the scenes with maternal health initiatives, providing resources to underserved communities. It partners with mental health organisations to destigmatise conversations around mental wellness. Her podcast ventures have given her a platform to have honest, substantive conversations, the kind you'll never hear in a palace corridor. She's cultivated relationships with other entrepreneurs, activists, and change-makers who respect her not as a title, but as a peer. And perhaps most importantly, she's shown her children what it looks like to stand up for yourself. To leave a situation that wasn't serving you. To build something meaningful from the ground up. That's a legacy worth more than any crown. The financial success is real lucrative production deals, speaking engagements, brand partnerships, but that's almost secondary to what she's actually creating in the world. She's building institutions, she's creating conversations, she's leaving fingerprints on real change. So while Piers Morgan keeps shouting into the void about how Meghan will fade, she's too busy shining. And maybe, just maybe, the real issue isn't that Meghan left the royal family, it's that she showed the world you can walk away from an institution and still win. Because in the end, Meghan Markle didn't lose a crown. She found her voice and used it to build an empire.